everyone, I'm Beth from the West Dallas Public Library, and welcome to another episode of Let's Go on Vacation Book Club. This is episode 2 in our Where is the Eiffel Tower trip. Okay. Chapter 2, Gustave Eiffel. Alexander Gustave Eiffel was born in Dijon, France on December 15th, 1832. Gustave was close to both of his parents. His father, Alexander, was an artist, a reader, a thinker, and a dreamer. His mother, Catherine, was much more practical. She was good at making plans, meeting deadlines, and handling money. When Gustave was young, his parents ran a thriving business that transported coal from mines to places around the world. Gustave and his 2 younger sisters spent many happy days at the canal ports in Dijon. He watched carts filled with coal arrive from the mines and get transferred to ships. He loved the hustle and bustle of boats being loaded and unloaded at all hours and in all kinds of weather. As the coal business grew, his parents spent more and more time working. Gustave went to live with his mother's mother, who was blind. His grandmother was strict, but Gustave didn't seem to mind that much. What Gustave didn't like was school. He found it boring and a waste of time compared to what was happening on the busy canal. He had a hard time keeping his mind on his work, so his grades were not good. He did just enough work to keep up. When Gustave was 12, he took his first trip to Paris. He'd never been on a train before, and he loved every minute of it. In Paris, he went to the theater and the ballet. Gustave was determined to return to the wonderful city as soon as he could. Back at school, he found teachers that understood his curiosity and imagination. They introduced him to literature and history. He also embraced science. His grades soared, and he was accepted to a college on the left bank of the Seine River in Paris, not far from where his tower would rise almost 40 years later. It was at college that Gustave fell in love with metal. Paris was changing. Architects were just beginning to use metal instead of stone. Iron bridges were being built. Gustave was curious about how metal could be used. How could he bend it? How could he shape it? What could he build? There were so many possibilities. He didn't know all the answers yet. He would need to learn how to create iron structures. Gustave enrolled in engineering school. After he graduated, he worked an unpaid job in an iron foundry owned by his brother-in-law. He watched and listened. In 1862, when Gustave was 30 years old, he married Marie Godelet. In need of money, he moved on to a paid job in a company that designed railway engines. He was fascinated by long, curving, distance railway tracks. Gustave's life was changing. His family was growing. In time, the Eiffels would have 3 daughters and 2 sons. But work was Gustave's passion. He never wavered in his love for metal. He owned his own company and hired engineers, architects, and designers. Together, they went on to create bridges, railway stations, churches, and other buildings all over the world. Between 1882 and 1884, he created the Garabit Viaduct, the world's highest bridge at the time. His company became most famous, however, for creating the metal framework inside the Statue of Liberty. Okay, so the Statue of Liberty. From 1879 to 1883, while the artist Frederick Auguste Bartoli sculpted the outside of the Statue of Liberty, Gustav Eiffel and his team worked on the inside. The statue would need a metal skeleton that would remain strong for hundreds of years. Eiffel's intricate frame used flexible, flat pieces of lightweight iron to attach the inner iron skeleton to the outer copper skin. The copper statue of the Roman goddess of liberty was a gift of friendship to the United States from the people of France. It would celebrate the freedom and independence Americans had won in the Revolutionary War. On June 19, 1885, the Statue of Liberty arrived at her new home on Bedloe's Island in New York Harbor. So this picture is a cross-section. So that's the inside metal skeleton of the Statue of Liberty that Eiffel helped create. Chapter 3, Mr. Eiffel's Tower. On May 2, 1886, the French government announced a contest that excited Gustave because of what he might create out of iron. Contestants were asked to submit a design for a tower that would be the entrance to the 1889 fair. The tower, which had to be 300 meters high, which is more than 900 feet, that would make it the tallest structure in the world. A structure so high would show what a great country France had become in the last 100 years. In addition, the tower must be a temporary structure that was easy to put up and take down. Gustave wanted to enter the contest and win. For a long time, he had been thinking about an 8-sided wooden tower in New York City. It was called the Latin Observatory. The 315-foot wooden building had been built in 1853. It burned down 3 years later. It had 3 levels and was larger at the bottom, tapering to a point at the top. Iron braces held all the wood in place. So here's a picture of the Latin Observatory. The wooden Latin Observatory struck Gustave as plain and unexciting. But something similar using iron would be amazing. In fact, even before the fair contest was announced, Gustave had asked Maurice Koechlin, an engineer in his drawing department, and Amélie Nougère, a structural engineer, to draw plans for such a tower. Because of the contest, Gustave worked with his top employees redesigning the earlier drawings. The tower would be made of metal. Thousands of pieces of wrought iron would be used to create a perfect design. He would need rivets to hold them together. Building the tower would be like working on a huge, well-planned, perfectly designed Lego creation. But Gustave wanted his tower to be more than a perfectly engineered structure. His new tower would be a work of art, a modern masterpiece. Stephen Sylvester was Eiffel's top architect. He was also a brilliant artist. He understood Gustave's dream. Working together, the two men would create a building to be admired throughout time. Sylvester imagined a graceful tower filled with beautiful details. His design featured swooping arches. Carved stonework would decorate the tower's legs. He suggested artistic trimmings and elegant decorations. The judges agreed that the plan was exactly what they were looking for. Eiffel won the contest. On January 8, 1887, they signed a contract. Everyone in Gustave's company was excited. Eiffel and his team of engineers had less than 2.5 years to build the tower. They weren't worried. They had built many bridges from wrought iron. They knew how to create structures quickly and safely, ones that could withstand violent storms and allow for huge crowds. 20 years earlier, Eiffel had set up workshops in Levallois-Perret, a northwest suburb of Paris. It was in those buildings that most of the work on the Eiffel Tower took place. Each piece of iron was cut, measured, numbered, and prepared to connect to the next piece. Rivet holes were drilled in each piece and precisely measured so that they would line up perfectly. Temporary pegs were used to connect the pieces. Later, when all the pieces were connected at the fairgrounds by the river, the pegs would be replaced by strong, permanent bolts. As the iron pieces were being cut and fitted together in the workshop, workmen were digging holes in the soil on the Champ de Mars, a large grassy park near the Seine River. The tower's 4 iron legs had to be planted deep in the ground. They also had to angle inward to the first platform. The sloping legs would hold the tower steady, even in the strongest winds. However, the workmen soon realized that the clay soil nearest the river created a problem. It was too wet. The 2 legs by the river might sink. Eiffel needed to find a way to make sure all 4 legs stood at the same level. He decided to dig the 2 holes in damp soil 16 feet deeper than the other 2 and pour in compressed air and extra concrete. Now the 4 holes were all equally deep. They were filled with cement, limestone blocks, and gravel. Iron anchors and bolts were inserted, and each iron leg was attached to a concrete column. When the foundation was complete, horse-drawn carts delivered girders, trusses, and other wrought iron pieces from the workshops to the building sites. People in the neighborhood had seen the 4 holes being dug. Now they could watch the actual tower rise. Small pieces of metal were riveted together into 4 perfectly placed iron legs. Men worked on wooden scaffolds that were made taller as the building grew. When the legs were in place, they formed a 410-foot square. After that, it was time to build the first floor. This would be the tower's base. It would look like a table with 4 legs. Once the base was in place, workers could build upward from floor to floor. Small creeper cranes pulled trolleys filled with materials up tracks inside the 4 slanted legs. The tracks would later be used to move elevators full of visitors upward. Soon, horizontal wrought iron trusses were in place on top of the legs, joining them together. Column and platform pieces were hoisted and joined. Workers spent longer and longer hours on the tower in order to meet the deadline. Canteens were installed on higher floors so they wouldn't have to waste time climbing up and down the steps to eat their meals. By April 1st, 1888, the first floor was complete. 4.5 months later, the second floor was finished. And 7.5 months after that, on March 31st, 1889, the final piece of the tower was riveted into place. Gustave and his workers had used over 18,000 pieces of iron and 2.5 million rivets to hold everything together. The tower was in place. It had taken 2 years, 2 months, and 5 days to construct the tallest structure in the world. Newspaper reporters were amazed at how fast it had gone up. They admired Gustave's precise planning and his new, faster machines, like the hydraulic jacks and creeper cranes that had helped speed up construction. It was dangerous work to build so high a structure, yet not a single person had died on the job. Sadly, one worker climbed the tower at night when it was closed. He was showing off for his girlfriend, and he fell to his death. Okay, so that's where we'll stop for today. Tomorrow we'll pick up with how the critics reacted to the tower. So come back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock for episode 3 of our Let's Go on Vacation book club, where we are now visiting the Eiffel Tower. Bye.